Uh, what's up, my friends? Well, I just wanted to talk about kids and the internet for a minute, without getting all nostalgic, I dare not try to say, oh, back in the days or as I was growing up. It's just one of those things I said I'm just never going to do, although I knew I would. We do have, we tend to remember certain times about our youth that stand out as being the right way or the correct way. For example, when I was a kid, my parents didn't understand why I listened to heavy metal music. And I remember my mom saying one time, how can you listen to that? It's just screaming, there's no words. And I remember talking to my friends and they say, yeah, all our parents think that there's no words. But we were listening to albums like Rest in Peace by Megadeth, which somebody mentioned this morning in a video. Phenomenal album that's completely political. It's all about, the dangers of nuclear war and, the potential that we'll destroy ourselves, the greed of man, all these different things, the wars in the Middle East and oil, all the things that people should have been talking about at that time. Who else was talking about it? Megadeth. And I was really into heavy metal when I was younger. And I remember, as my parents were saying that, I was thinking about how when they were kids, the Beatles were really popular. And I was thinking of how their parents thought that the Beatles were satanic and that this was the end of kids. It was all about the music. And then it happened again. The kids of today with the rap music, except for the thing was, when I was in my, let's just say in my early years, my 8 or 9 years old, 10, that's when a lot of rap started to come around. By the time I was 12, I was into NWA and MC Hammer. I mean, you name it, a variety of different stuff. But I loved NWA, Eazy-E, and, it's brutal kind of stuff. Public Enemy. Very politically oriented towards, for the black community, rather. Which was an interesting look, completely different perspective than, what was out there at the time. And I got into the Beastie Boys, and I was really into, the whole Beastie Boys and Run DMC thing. I remember one time I called in to win tickets to the Beastie Boys Run DMC concert, and I was like caller 9 out of 10, and I just never forgot that. I was like, so close, But anyhow, I don't want to get too far off track. Here I am saying I'm going to get nostalgic. What I really wanted to say was just the kids of today who are playing on the internet. I have 2 kids in there, 6 and then a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, 4 and 7, let's say. He just turned 7 and he'll be 4 soon. And they're in there playing Minecraft. Kids of today just love that game. From my generation, looking at it, I can have a little bit of nostalgia towards it because it's a very low resolution, everything is in blocks, and it reminds me of the 80s with the games I grew up with, although much more complex with lights and circuits and everything. And the average person hears about Minecraft and they might not think, that it's very educational. You're building stuff, that's great. But, the other day my kid's like, check this out, and he wrote a song, and you can change the notes on these little music blocks, and he made it to where when you hit the circuit, you can actually change not only the tone, but the duration, as well as how much time is between each note. So it's like, dun, 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 dun. And it wasn't anything, a well-orchestrated song or anything. The point was that he created a song on it. And I saw this thing where these kids were making calculators and fully operational, that they're using Minecraft to help kids design, new circuits and new functional computers and stuff. So, what I'm getting at is if you're a parent and you have kids, one of the most difficult things today is to decide what is appropriate and what's not. When we get up today, these days, as adults, we generally grab our pad, our computer, or our phone, and we look at the news, we look at our videos, we look at whatever we do, okay? And this is no different from me getting up when I was a kid and seeing my parents at the kitchen table with their newspapers. But I might look back at that and think of the nostalgia of reading a paper. But when you really think about it, it's the biggest waste of time of all, reading a newspaper. That news is already long gone. You could get that on the internet in 5 minutes, It slowed things down a little bit, but it was generally not that useful of stuff. So, I guess what I'm saying is that the computer world, the digital world, we can't be afraid of it, but it can't be everything. It can't be the only place that we seek for our, understanding. Reading a book still has its place. But I did read this article about, maybe it was a video, it was about the kids of today. There's a name for it, there's a word for it. And every generation has this same repeating thing of the kids of today. There was a time when it was yo-yos. Oh, these kids and their yo-yos, or these kids and their, their army guys, or whatever it is the kids are doing. And they showed an old article from, I think, the 1920s. I can't remember which magazine it was, but it was talking about how the family is becoming divided up because everyone's reading their own thing. And it showed a family all sitting, a couple people on the sofa, one guy on a chair, and somebody over on another chair, and they're all reading their own books. And the article was talking about how everyone's so separated in their own worlds, in their own stories. And to a person who grew up with that, they might think, well, that's a good thing, everybody's reading their books. But then you realize every book was fiction, and that really nobody's gaining any knowledge from these stories. That the things that the schools teach, they talk about these old stories that we all need to know, like, Pip and the Great Expectations and all. Like, why? Why do I need to read Charles Dickens? Why do I need to read any old English stuff? Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn. I have one of those series of books for kids, and it's got all those, Huck Finn and Journey to the Center of the Earth and everything. And we decided to pick one out and read a couple. They pretty much sucked, but I got one out. It was Huck Finn. No, I couldn't get through that one. It was Journey to the Center of the Earth. And the book is just so poorly written. The science is horrendous in it. But of course, we can't expect much from back then. But a little more research could have been done on the reality of, for example, they're traveling through these tunnels into the bowels of the earth, and they need some water, so they, find a hollow spot and tap the wall until a little spring comes out. Then this water spring follows them as they travel down the tunnel along next to them, so they have fresh water the whole time, for a while. And I'm sitting here thinking, dude, the whole tunnel would flood, or the water would be so filthy and dirty. But here, I'm thinking too technical. Don't want to get too off track, but the point is that we have nostalgia because it's something that we've been told is good, and that our parents thought was good. That there's critics out there who tell us these books are good. But they're not good. And there are some good books out there, like Where the Red Fern Grows was one of those books I read when I was young. It's a great book. It's not that old, but Dan and Anne, I'll never forget that. I think I read it twice. And when I was 12, 13, I did read some novels. I remember reading Louis L'Amour. It was Last of the something, and it was about Native Americans, I believe, and it was this whole big, thick book, and I remember sitting in front of a tree in my, my front yard and reading this. And so what, right? So you read a book. We've all read lots of books, but it's so hard today to justify learning, even on the internet, because this is where we get our information now. And I guess this is why I'm talking about it, to try to help process it myself too. Maybe it's because the fun and the work are so close together. In other words, for me, learning is fun. But for a lot of people, it's separate from the things that they do. So if you're reading a web page that's educational, then you might click on your Facebook page or your YouTube page or answer comments. Next thing you know, you're doing emails. And I think when you're online, it's really hard to distinguish between production and a waste of time. And there are plenty of games that are a waste of time. I've never played Candy Crush Saga or any of that stuff. Those games are just useless, but there are people that love that stuff. And I love Tetris. I used to play that. And I played video games too, so I think the only reason I don't play video games is because I know what a waste of time they are. It goes by so fast. But raising children in this environment, when you have parents that are educating themselves or learning or working on computers, for me it's very difficult. I work from home, obviously. Being an herb vendor, I am printing labels and packaging stuff, and my kids are like, what are you doing, And they're like, can we see on the computer, can we watch a show? And I'm like, no, I'm working. This is different than play. But they don't know the difference. So it's the very same tool we use for work. There's no uniform to put on to show I'm working, you know. And I don't know. I don't know what the kids of tomorrow are going to be like, but I can honestly say that not letting your kids play with devices, and this is really what I'm trying to get at with this video, is that if you don't let your children embrace technology, they might get left behind. We know, I know a few people who have kids who don't let their kids play with any technology. I even heard, I can't remember if it's, I don't know if it's still this way, but one of my friends, his wife, well, the son's mom didn't want him to be able to play with anything that made noise. So she would like return any toys that made noise or anything like that. But she was on the computer all the time, making it really hard to, you know, justify it. And we as parents, you know, we want to raise good kids that are able to go outside and just play with their toys. But we have to step back and ask a minute, why is this just what we've been told for a long time, that kids shouldn't be on computers? You know, they always said, don't stare at the screen, you'll rot your brain. You know, it's the idiot box, the boob tube. You know, my dad always called the TV the idiot box, and he hated TV, but he watched it. We had it, and but he knew that it was a waste of time. And when you look at cable television, it is a waste of time. You spend a quarter of every hour watching commercials for somebody else's product. You are willingly spending 25% of your time having somebody sell shit to you. And for so many years, I just went along with it as the norm until I canceled my cable 5 years ago or so. Never looked back. But even today, ads, commercials, these things just drive us nuts. But now that the internet's changing, that there's not just pop-ups all the time that drive us nuts, that we're actually able to you know, go and research and do things without getting boggled down by ads. But now there's clickbait and what they call the, you know, the fake news stories that are just trying to get you out there too. Hi, buddy. Got a dove over here. So yeah. I guess another way to look at it would be, I have a 22-year-old son, okay? He just left for work. He's not very good on a computer. He grew up at a time when computers, you know, when he was like 14, 15, well, actually it was like 12 is when we really first got the internet, and he never really learned how to use a whole lot of computer stuff. My two kids now, since they're so young and they're learning so young, they're going to be able to whiz past, you know, me in no time. And I think that that's important, that our kids are better off than we were. Maybe some parents are just afraid that their kids might be better off than them, or that they might know more than them, or that they may be better suited for the world, because it must be scary to think, geez, I could have learned so much more than I did. My kids are so much, you know, like when my kids grow up, I know they're going to be smarter than me. I can only hope they'll be smarter than me, because every generation needs to be a little bit smarter than the one before it if we're ever going to pull our heads out of our asses. With something like this in my hand, sometimes I'm driving down the street and I see it and I just think, wow. I smoked Camels and Marlboros for years. I rolled drum cigarettes for 3 or 4 years. I smoked for 25 years of my life. I started when I was about 15 and just quit a year ago finally. And yeah, I'd quit a few times here and there, but this is technology. This is another thing. This is... I'm able to embrace this, like, what a digital cigarette device. And a lot of people would blow it off just because of what it is. And I know a lot of people don't like vaping, but I'm just making the point that you're never too old to look at the new technology and take it on. And with what's going on with this whole, you know, a lot of people are scared of transhumanism. And then there are a lot of people, I realize, who are complete transhumanist supporters, that they're obsessed with it. Body modifications. Permanent alteration of your mind or your body or parts of you, you know, metal pieces that are just one thing. Like, you know, having implants or spikes, that's nothing compared to some of the things people are trying to do now to their bodies. It's wild. But, you know, it's a brave new world. There's going to be a lot going on in the future with choosing our babies and our genetics, and you know, selective breeding with humans, and it's just crazy out there. I mean, hanging on to our nostalgic past might be sometimes our only hope, and maybe the technology might get a little bit too much sometimes, you know, and maybe we do go a little too deep. I think I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm not going to resist it. I don't want to be the guy cutting wood out in the middle of nowhere in my house off the grid, separate from society, but I also don't want to be the city boy who's in there doing, you know, computer shit all day and who doesn't understand the woods. It's like there's got to be this balance of nature and technology, and it's a tough one. Like, I don't even want to use computers half the time, but I have to because like for business, even at the times when I don't want to use it, I'll have to go on and print a label, check an email, and all of it's so complicated. But after you finally get things going, it's like you get a system going, and then you got to start and try something else, a whole new system. Like, it took me a year to get my business going with the Kratom business and rolling, and all right, finally things are flowing easily, and then boom, you have to start all over. Technology, it's not as easy as flipping open a new notepad. It's like you have to get new, you know, all these different things to connect. You have bank accounts connected to, you know, sales and processors, and it's nuts, and it can be overwhelming, and I guess that's why a lot of people just can't stand technology and computers. It's just like too much. But it's not an age thing, because I've seen 75, 80-year-old men and women out there typing away and doing it. They're like into it, you know, doing their thing. They're learning. I mean, there's nothing cooler to me than seeing like a 75-year-old man who's really active and into like the YouTube comments or something. Or some of these guys who like made I Am Kratom videos because of this issue. That were older people, older gents and gals that maybe have never made a video in their life, but they feel like they have to speak, and that they're willing to grab a camera, put an SD card in there, turn it on, you know, make a video, then upload it to their YouTube channel. I mean, all of these things seem simple to those of us who use it. But go back to before you'd ever used YouTube, when you first, if you've ever uploaded, you know, before you knew how to do all these things. It can be a daunting thing, and so having our kids aware of that is an awesome thing. I've sometimes heard the argument of, you know, I'll not hear this from even my own mom, who say, what happens if the lights go out, or, you know, the technology's gone tomorrow? You know, the kids have to be prepared to be able to not always have technology, and I've come to the conclusion that they will. You know, the power went out yesterday, like halfway through the day. The kids wanted to play a game, and they're like, I was like, well, there's no internet. And so they're like, okay, so they went off and played. I mean, that's, in other words, we don't have to worry about the kids adapting to a new generation or a new world. We are the ones that have a harder time adapting to a new world. We, the adults. So that's the world as I see it, and I don't know how the kids see it, but I'm going to go in there and get them off their damn game and ask them.